Theme really of our news today, which as always has come together due to the individual work of the presenters for today's news, is really on the subject of the state, how it is working, how it's deceiving people, and a little bit of what the real agenda is. No better place to start than have a look at the Labour Party and the sorts of images that they're showing very strongly. So here we are, be part of change, join Labour and together we can change Britain. But of course, they don't say changing from what to what, and this is extremely important. The Labour website, just full of these images. Here's Starmer looking particularly bland and authoritarian, and it simply says change. But what on earth are they talking about? Because it's obvious that they're not actually declaring what the change is. That change is going to happen. And here's another one where Starmer is in front of the label, change begins. So I'm going to ask our audience again, what is the change that's being planned and implemented? So how do we dive into this? Well, let's have a little look at the Labour Party and democracy. Now, this is very simplistic, but I've done it in order to try and get our audience today thinking about what they're actually seeing. So, of course, in the UK, at least, everything revolves around the big parties, Labour and Conservative, and that party organisation is the beast, which, of course, ultimately holds power over choosing and getting people like Starmer into the position of Prime Minister. Now, hand in glove with that goes the power of the civil service, and I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more in just a couple of minutes. But essentially, this is the power base that the public is shown, and we are led to believe that this forms our representative democracy, where basically the nation state is working in the best interests of the public. I believe this is a sham, a complete sham. And let's bring in the other side of the coin, which I'm calling the international collective. Let's remember that funding is the key thing which makes the political system happen, whether it's in UK or in the United States. So that's key. Then we've got very powerful lobbying groups such as the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. We've got the European Union. We've got the World Economic Forum. These are just examples. The powerful United Nations, of course, highly influential. Labour Friends of Israel, very powerful within the Labour Party. And I'm just bringing in another example, the Council on Foreign Relations. But of course, there's the Trilateral Commission. There's many others. And we already know that Starmer has pledged allegiance not to his nation state, but to the international collective, because he was quite happy to say publicly that he would prefer working with the World Economic Forum than Westminster any time. But here's his powerful civil service with a headcount of over 500,000 people. They're all broken down into departments, numbers and categories here. But I'm going to say to our viewers that it's very clear that this organisation has been hollowed out from the inside, in as much as overall it's been captured by the woke international agenda. We can call it woke fascism because the corporates are in there as well. But if you look down the contents of this statistical bulletin on the civil service, you see that everything is being looked at in detail. Sex, age, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, a very big one, religion and belief. Surprisingly, over 50% of the civil service say they're Christian, but of course that's not reflected by the activities of the state. And then if we go in a different direction, we can bring in that Labour system again. But if we have a look at the funding, a big thanks to politics.co.uk that did a really good analysis, and I encourage you to go and see that. Here's some of the sums of money put in. 1 million from Ecotricity Limited, 700,000 from Martin Taylor. I just picked out one person. This is Danny Lou Thompson. I Now, could be somebody with a duplicate name, but I'm guessing it isn't. But all we're just showing is here is a person linked ultimately with investment management. I would say that's pretty close to hedge funds. And then when we look at that organisation, we're into Quadrature's Climate Foundation. So this would represent a very powerful lobbying group for this sort of policy into the Labour Party. So if we've got an international change agenda being unleashed on UK, we've got people pumping money into the Labour Party, effectively that controls it. What sort of people have we got in the Labour Party? Well, we know Starmer, and we mentioned Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, on Monday. But let's bring him back on screen.
Putin said Russian bases. Putin said don't send tanks. We sent them. Putin said don't send any missiles. We sent them. Putin threatens every few months to use nuclear weapons. It's totally unaccepted. We won't be bullied by Putin's shameless grandstanding.
Well, the point I'm making here is he's mocking a foreign leader of importance, the arrogance, the aggression. This is the sort of people we're dealing with, and they want the war running because it's in the interests of the West. Now, finally, we've got Western media talking about the death toll in Ukraine. Let's have a look at this on screen. And basically, we've now got admission from the Wall Street Journal, at least, of 1 million now dead or injured in the Russian-Ukrainian war. This is, in my opinion, a pretty accurate figure. Let's expand it, 1 million. And ultimately, this war is to be continued in the best interests of the West until the last Ukrainian is dead. More Ukrainian deaths than Russians. The BBC talking about 70,000 Russian dead. The figure that's being talked about widely on the internet about Ukrainian deaths is 300 to 400,000, and this would agree with the figures of about 1 million dead or injured. So these are horrific. This is a horrific state of affairs. This is the mentality of people in politics in UK, and we're focusing on the Labour Party. But the other thing going on, of course, is the police state. We could call it Starmer's Stasi state. And a big thank you to one of our viewers that spotted this police job advert. And what's it about? Well, it's about somebody to work collaboratively as part of analysts, researchers and police officers working under the Strategic Intelligence and Briefing Team related to aggravated activism, strategic protest and significant public order events. Be under no illusion, this is spying on the UK public, and anybody speaking out against the government is now going to come under this sort of scrutiny with arrests and sentencing accordingly. So this is the state, this is Starmer's Stasi state, but of course it's got this huge corporatist element which could also lead it to a description of fascism. Let's have another look at Lammy in action, this time apparently on a softer note. But is that true? Let's have a listen.
But we need a hard-headed, realist approach towards using all levers at our disposal, from the diplomatic to the financial. And I say to you now, these are not contradictions, because nothing could be more central to the UK's national interests than delivering global progress on arresting rising temperatures.
So this is all soft and squidgy dialogue. It's all about saving the world. We are to believe climate change is real and not an in-depth political agenda. And we're to believe that Lammy, the man that wants to keep the killing going in Ukraine, has got the best interests of every human being on the planet with regard to saving us from climate change. Let's have a look at some of his words in detail. That, of course, was just an excerpt from what he said, but here we've got some other quotes. We've seen with the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, the Green Deal in the European Union, and the accelerating transition in China, foreign policy, economic and industrial policy becoming increasingly intertwined. So we're not going to be able to say what's going on because we can't say that it's foreign policy or it's industrial policy or it's economic. It's in a blur. It's in a snake's wedding is my favourite expression. It's in a knot, and the public is not going to untie that knot. And this is because this is strategic globalist agenda. He says, with Ed Miliband, Steve Reed leading COP negotiations on climate and nature, we have a pair of experienced, determined negotiators. The Miliband brothers, of course, coming from a Marxist background. And we've got to push all of this under the UK government in order to keep 1.5 degrees alive. And finally here, to drive forward this cross-government reset even further, I am announcing today that we will appoint new UK special representatives for climate change and nature. And he goes on to say, of course, that he's got Ed Miliband and Steve Reed to support, but they're going to reboot internationally, showing that whether you are from the global north or the global south, we want to forge genuine partnerships to tackle this crisis together. So this is about the complete reorganisation of politics, not only in UK, but also on a world stage, supposedly to protect us from climate change. But of course, with those changes, any other part of our life, any and each part of our lives can be changed under this new system. What is the system? Some people have labelled it as a woke fascism, which I think is pretty accurate. Some people are calling it more a Marxist system. Some people refer to communitarianism. But whatever you choose to label it as, if you look at the detail, this system is hostile to the individual, it's hostile to families, and it's certainly hostile to the nation state, because the nation state needs to be destroyed in order to bring in the Great Reset, which is their ultimate world political agenda.